What's going on, guys? It's the Draft Nerd, and it's another mock draft Monday, so I'm bringing you guys yet another mock draft. This one will have trades. I'm not sure how many yet, but without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, coming in at number 1, we got the Chicago Bears. This is going to be the same pick that I always do, and it's probably not going to change up until draft day. The obvious pick's Caleb Williams, and I know Bears fans hate that, but, you know, it's going to happen, so you better get used to it. And the real question is, where does Justin Fields go now? I thought it was very likely that he would go to maybe the Steelers, but they got Russell Wilson now. You could think that they might be going to the Falcons. The Falcons seem dead set on trying to get Kirk Cousins, so until Kirk Cousins makes his decision on where he's going, I really think it's going to be a bit murky to see where Justin Fields goes. I think that if the Falcons strike out on a Kirk Cousins, then they're most definitely going to go for a Justin Fields. But like I said, just until Kirk Cousins figures out where he's going to land, then it's going to be very difficult to see where Justin Fields lands. So it's a bit of a domino effect. But either way, Caleb Williams is your number 1 overall pick, and it's almost set in stone at this point. But moving on to the Washington Commanders, if I was the GM and if I was doing this mock draft based on what I would do, the pick would be Drake May. But it seems more and more likely that the Commanders are going to go for a Jaden Daniels. In a Cliff Kingsbury offense, Jaden Daniels fits a bit better. He's more of that dual threat quarterback. Cliff Kingsbury's worked with Kyler Murray when he was the head coach in Arizona. So, Jaden Daniels just seems more of the Cliff Kingsbury type of quarterback. Now, do the Commanders solely base their quarterback of the future off of their offensive coordinator currently? I don't know. But I know a lot of people are saying that Jaden Daniels to the Commanders is a very, very likely destination. So in this mock draft, we're going to go ahead and do that. And this leaves the Patriots in a bit of a weird position because I think the Patriots really, really like Jaden Daniels. And if Jaden Daniels does fall to 3, they're going to take him. But since he went to the Commanders at 2, I think there's multiple different ways to look at this Patriots pick. You could just go with the next best quarterback in Drake May, who I think is the second best quarterback in the draft, and just get your quarterback of the future to go along with the new coaching regime. You could also stick and pick at 3 and take the best prospect in the draft and a Marvin Harrison Jr. because we all know the Patriots do not have many weapons. Or you could look to trade down with a team like maybe the Giants, Falcons possibly, maybe the Broncos, although they don't really have draft picks. So you could trade down. That's an option as well. I think it's really between taking Drake May because, as we know, Mac Jones is no longer on the team. He's on the Jaguars now. And really, there's no quarterback on that roster besides Bailey Zappi. Now, you could also go and sign a Jacoby Brissett in free agency, a Ryan Tannehill, someone like that to hold you over for this year and then, try to find your quarterback of the future next year. And I think that's very likely, actually. So what we're going to do is we're going to trade down with the Giants. And we are going to send the 6th pick, 39th pick, first round next year, and maybe like a 4th rounder. This is just a rough trade outline. The only thing that really matters in this mock draft is that the Patriots are trading down from 3 to 6. So we're going to force that trade, have that go through. And now we have the New York Giants on the clock at number 3, and they are going to take their quarterback of the future in Drake May. Drake May could sit behind Daniel Jones for like a half a year or maybe even a full year and just kind of learn the system because there's no real reason to rush Drake May if you have Daniel Jones for at least one more year. But if I'm being realistic, I think Drake May is probably going to beat out Daniel Jones in training camp. Moving on to 4, we got the Arizona Cardinals, and I think this is a very obvious pick. If Marvin Harrison Jr. falls to them at 4, you take the best prospect in the draft. Simple as that. Moving on to 5, we got the Chargers, and I think this is another interesting pick because you could, 1, take a receiver, whether that's a Malik Neighbors or a Rome Odunze. You could take your right tackle of the future and Joe Alt, have him kick over from left tackle to right tackle and replace Trey Pipkins. You could go Brock Bowers and get you that, just ultimate tight end weapon that Harbaugh loves. Harbaugh loves his tight ends. Or you could trade down in this spot as well. Now, the thing about trading down is I don't know if there's a team that's going to want to trade up to the 5th pick if it doesn't involve one of the top 3 quarterbacks. You could see a team like, I guess maybe the Raiders trading up here and taking a J.J. McCarthy, because a lot of people are saying J.J. McCarthy's going top 10, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. But realistically, I think they go receiver here, and it seems like the popular pick is to go Rome Odunze over a guy like Malik Neighbors. Me personally, I still think Malik Neighbors is the better prospect, but a lot of people are saying Rome Odunze is wide receiver 2 on a lot of NFL teams' radars, so we are going to go with Rome Odunze to the Chargers at the 5th pick. Now this leaves the Patriots. So the Patriots got a bunch of extra picks, trading down only 3 spots, and they still can take either a cornerstone at left tackle with Joe Alt, or they could take a receiver, something that they desperately need, and probably a very good future All-Pro receiver, Malik Neighbors. Or they could even go Brock Bowers here. But I think that the most likely pick here is Malik Neighbors. I know they gave Kendrick Bourne a 3-year deal, but you still need that wide receiver 1. Kendrick Bourne is definitely not that. Moving on to number 7, we got the Titans, and again, kind of similar to the Cardinals, if the Titans have Joe Alt still on the board here when they're picking, they're going to run to the podium and take Joe Alt. They need offensive line help. They started off on the right track with getting Peter Skoronski last season. They still need to keep building it, and getting a really, really solid left tackle in Joe Alt is a perfect way to keep building that offensive line. Now with this 8th pick here, we got the Falcons, and I think this is a possible J.J. McCarthy pick if they strike out on both Kirk Cousins and Justin Fields, although I don't think that's very likely. I do think that they're going to, get a quarterback, whether it's free agency or via trade. I really don't think they're going to draft one, especially if the top 3 are off the board. So that leaves us with a Brock Bowers. Probably not going to happen, as we've seen what happened with Kyle Pitts. You could go with the first defensive player off the board, whether that's a Quinion Mitchell, a Byron Murphy, maybe a Dallas Turner. And I think that's the most realistic option. Raheem Morris is the head coach now. He's a defensive-minded head coach, and getting him a cornerstone on the defense is a very real possibility. Now, is that a Quinion Mitchell, a Dallas Turner, maybe a Nate Wiggins? Realistically, I think he's going to want to get that really solid edge rusher, and for most NFL teams, Dallas Turner is that number 1 edge rusher, so we're going to go with Dallas Turner, and he is the first defensive player off the board there at 8. Moving on to 9, we got the Chicago Bears, and this is their 2nd pick. Took Caleb Williams with the 1st pick. Now, they could look to trade down here with a team like maybe the Bengals, because the Bengals are probably going to be looking to get a tackle of the future, and with, Talise Fuaga, or Talise Fuanga, is I believe how you pronounce it, Troy Fatanu still on the board, Olu Fashanu still on the board. I don't know. That rank 17 bothers me a bit. I still think he's a top 10 player. But ultimately, I think we're going to stick and pick here, and we're going to take Brock Bowers. The Bears don't really have a solid tight end on their roster. I know they have Cole Kmet, but, Brock Bowers is more of a weapon. You can play him in the slot, and just get another weapon for Caleb Williams to throw to is ideal. That might not be the most popular pick among Bears fans, especially, Caleb Williams and Brock Bowers. So we'll have to see how Bears fans like that in the comments. But moving on, we got the Jets at 10. And I think this is a tackle pick. If all the, top tier weapons are off the board, I think you got to go tackle here. And the question is, do you want a Talise Fuanga, do you want a Troy Fatanu, or do you want a Olu Fashanu? Now, I've been very adamant about this. The Jets want a pass protecting tackle to protect Aaron Rodgers. Talise Fuanga is more of a run blocking mauler. Troy Fatanu is also kind of that. And Olu Fashanu is the pass blocker of the group. So I'm going to go with Olu Fashanu here. He's the best pass blocking tackle in the class. I don't know, him and Joe Alt. Joe Alt's, kind of in a tier above the rest of these guys. But I think Olu Fashanu fits what the Jets are looking for more than a guy like Talise Fuanga or a Troy Fatanu. Now moving on to 11 here, we got the Vikings. And for the sake of this mock draft, we're going to assume that Kirk Cousins re-signs with the Vikings. And if that's the case, then I think they look to go defense here. We still got a Byron Murphy on the board. We still got a Quinion Mitchell, Jerzon Newton, Nate Wiggins, Terry and Arnold. There's still a lot of really solid Cooper DeJean. I don't know why I keep skipping over him. There's still a lot of really solid options on the board for the defensive side of the ball. And ultimately, I think they go with the interior of the defensive line. They get either a Byron Murphy or a Jerzon Newton. I'm a bit higher on Jerzon Newton over Byron Murphy, but I know a lot of NFL teams are in love with Byron Murphy. So I think Byron Murphy is probably going to be the first defensive tackle off the board, and he's going to be going to the Vikings at 11. Moving on to 12, we got the Broncos. And again, I'm sorry, Broncos fans, but I think, especially after the Russell Wilson trade, I think it's very likely that if J.J. McCarthy falls to them at 12, they're going to be taking J.J. McCarthy. Another team might trade up with a team above them and take J.J. McCarthy, but if J.J. McCarthy falls to them at 12, I think that they're very, very likely to pick him, and then still probably sign a Jacoby Brissett, maybe a Gardner Minshew to kind of play next year and have J.J. McCarthy kind of learn the system for a year. I think that's the most likely outcome. But moving on to 13, we got the Raiders, and I think this is probably a defensive pick. You could look to go tackle here, get their right tackle, maybe a Talise Fuanga. I think that's a very possible pick there. But I'm going to go with who I believe is a very real possibility of being the first defensive player off the board in Quinion Mitchell. In this mock draft, he's the third, but I really do think he's going to be the first cornerback off the board over a guy like Terrion Arnold, Nate Wiggins, and Cooper DeJean. I think Quinion Mitchell is solidified himself as one of the top cornerback prospects. Now moving on to 14, we got the Saints, and I think you got to go tackle here. Ryan Ramczyk is dealing with injury issues, might have to retire. Trevor Penning is not great. So I think you got to go with a tackle, especially if a Troy Fautanu and a Talise Fuanga are still on the board. I'm going to go with Talise Fuanga. I think he's arguably the second best tackle prospect in the class. And I think he could be that right tackle. Or you could move him over to left tackle, although I would be way more comfortable having him play right tackle. Moving on to 15, we got the Indianapolis Colts. And this pick I'm starting to like a lot. A lot of these receivers have kind of helped their draft stock post-combine. And I think this is either a Brian Thomas pick or an A.D. Mitchell pick. The Colts love their kind of big athletic players, and both those guys are big and athletic. I think Brian Thomas is a bit higher on most people's boards. He's more of the, big, long, athletic freak who's just an insane deep threat. And I think that's what the Colts need. They have their kind of number one-ish guy in a Michael Pittman, who's that more physical guy and can work in, all three levels of the field. They have their Josh Downs in the slot who can create separation with ease. And then they can have their big body deep threat in a Brian Thomas. I think that's a very good receiving core for Anthony Richardson to come back to. Moving on to 16, we got the Seahawks. And I think this is either an edge pick, maybe a Jared Verse, Leatu Latu, or I think this is a Jackson Powers Johnson pick. Jackson Powers Johnson has rose up so many teams' draft boards. He's risen up mine a ton. I think he's almost a lock to go in the top 20-ish picks. I think the latest he goes is 21 to the Dolphins. But I think he could go here. I think it's between Troy Fautanu and Jackson Powers Johnson. Troy Fautanu, he measured out to be more of a tackle, so I doubt that the Seahawks would want to draft him to move him into guard. It's a possibility for sure, but I really want to see Troy Fautanu, try out at tackle to begin his career. So we're going to end up going with JPJ here. A very, very, very solid center prospect. We could also move out to guard very easily as well. Moving on to 17, we got the Jaguars. And I think this is either a receiver pick or a cornerback pick. They're most likely losing Calvin Ridley to free agency, and that just leaves them Christian Kirk, really. So you could look to go with an A.D. Mitchell, a Ladd McConkey, Troy Franklin, but you could also look to go with one of these guys in the second round, like a Keon Coleman, Jalen Polk, Xavier Legette, Xavier Worthy. I think that the receiver position is a bit deeper than the cornerback position. You still got some of the very top prospects like a Cooper DeJean, Nate Wiggins, Terrion Arnold, Kool-Aid McKinstry. So I think you go with one of these guys over one of those wide receivers. The question is, you go Nate Wiggins, Terrion Arnold, or Cooper DeJean. I think it's Terrion Arnold. I think he has the most upside out of these guys, and he's probably one of the better day one options as well. Moving on here to the Bengals, I think that they're going to run to the podium and get a Troy Fautanu to help protect Joe Burrow. the Bengals need to, protect Joe Burrow at all costs. Hopefully he doesn't get injured next season, and a good way to do that is to get a really good tackle / guard in Troy Fautanu. Moving on to 19, we got the Rams, and I think they just go best player available on the defense, and I think that's either a Leatu Latu or a Cooper DeJean. I go Cooper DeJean here a lot because I think he's basically just the Cooper Kupp of the defense, just a really solid instinctual player. But to switch it up, I think we're going to go with an edge rusher to help pair alongside a Byron Young. And I think we're going to go with Leatu Latu. He had a very solid combine, better than expected. And I think that was the only thing holding him up. He also apparently he passed most teams' medicals. There was no, surfaced information that he passed any team's medical or that he failed any team's medicals. So I think he's good to go as a fully, quote-unquote, healthy and injury-free player. And if that's the case, I think he does go top 20 in the draft. Moving on to pick number 20, we got the Steelers. And I think I usually go tackle here. And with Amarius Mims and J.C. Latham still on the board, that's very enticing. But I go tackle for them almost every single time. So I think we're going to switch it up and go with cornerback. And with Nate Wiggins still on the board, I know he's a bit smaller. He does definitely need to gain some weight, but he's an extremely fast, athletic guy who can play both man and zone coverage if you need him to. So we're going to go with Nate Wiggins here to the Steelers. Moving on to 21, we got the Miami Dolphins, and I think this is still an offensive line pick. It kind of sucks that Jackson Powers-Johnson isn't on the board, but we could still go with a J.C. Latham or an Amarius Mims. I think J.C. Latham's the better pick here because he's more versatile. I think he could play guard. I think some teams might even view him as a guard. Or you could, have him play tackle. Teron Armstead's always injury prone, is, on the verge of retirement as well. So I think we're going with J.C. Latham just because he has more positional flexibility. Moving on to 22, we got the Eagles, and Cooper DeJean's just staring me right in the face. I feel like a perfect fit for the Eagles. You got your two outside guys for next year in a Darius Slay and James Bradbury. You guys, I'm pretty sure, released Avonte Maddox. And you could just, you could slot in Cooper DeJean right in the slot year one. You could play him as safety as well. And then once James Bradbury and, say, Darius Slay both are off the team, you could definitely move Cooper DeJean to the outside if you wanted to. I think he's just a Swiss Army knife. You can play him in the slot, you can play him as safety, or you can play him on the outside. Moving on to 23, we got the Houston Texans. And I like going receiver here. And with an A.D. Mitchell, I like that. I think it's a little enticing. But Jerzon Newton's also still on the board. I think he's a top 20 player. And him falling to 23 to the Texans, who also need help at defensive tackle, I think you got to go with Jerzon Newton there. Moving on to 24, we got the Dallas Cowboys. And I think this is a offensive line pick, even though Jared Verse is a very tempting pick here at 24. We're going to look to go with either a Amarius Mims, Graham Barton maybe. Tyler Guyton seems like a Cowboy, but I would have a hard time picking Tyler Guyton over a guy like Amarius Mims. I think you got to go with one of those two guys. Graham Barton is listed as a tackle, but he's definitely more of a guard at the next level. And with Tyron Smith most likely, done with the Cowboys, I think you got to try to find his replacement. So why not get the long, athletic, admittedly pretty raw prospect in Amarius Mims, but, I think he's got all the potential in the world. Moving on to 25, we got the Packers, and this is always such a hard pick to make for the Packers. I mean, because they're pretty solid everywhere. They don't really have any, blaring holes. I mean, you could go Tyler Nubin here, but I don't know. I don't know if a safety goes round 1 this year. And with Coolin McKinstry still on the board as well, I think that's a very possible pick to pair him alongside Jair Alexander. I think that's what we're going to do here. Coolin McKinstry's fallen down a lot of people's boards, but I still think he's a first-round caliber player. Moving on to 26, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I think this is where the fall of Jared Verse ends. The Buccaneers need, youth at the edge rusher position. They started good with Yaya Diaby last year. Why not get Jared Verse to pair alongside Yaya Diaby? Moving on to 27, we got the Cardinals. And, Jared Verse would have been the pick if he fell to 27, but he didn't. So I think you keep your focus on the offense. And I think you try to help out that offensive line. Will Hernandez hasn't been great. And with Graham Barton, who is going to be a really good not tackle. He's going to be a really good guard at the next level. I think you got to go him. He can play all over the offensive line, but I think he's most, suited for guard. Moving on to the Bills here at 28. I think you got to go receiver here, especially when A.D. Mitchell's still on the board. I have a hard time thinking A.D. Mitchell even falls to 28. I think he could very realistically go to maybe the Cowboys, or actually definitely the Cowboys. He seems like a Cowboys pick now that I'm thinking about it. He could he could go to the Dolphins here at 21, but he did fall in this mock draft, so we're gonna have the Bills run to the podium and get Josh Allen a target to throw to and A.D. Mitchell. Moving on to 29, we got the Lions. And the Lions have a really solid team. I mean, the one player that's really just, staring at me right now is Zach Frazier. The Lions need help on the interior of that offensive line. And Zach Frazier is 100% a Lions type of player. He's just a mean, aggressive offensive lineman. And I think that's exactly what Dan Campbell likes. So I think that's a perfect pick for the Lions there at 29. Moving on to 30, we got the Ravens, and I think this is where you go with a guy like a Tyler Guyton. He's a super raw guy, but he has all the things you can't teach, like the length, athleticism, stuff like that. Now, I wouldn't particularly want him to start day one, but him learning behind a guy like Ronnie Stanley, I mean, as long as he has a good mentor, I think Tyler Guyton could be a really solid player in year 2, 3, and 4. Moving on to 31, we got the San Francisco 49ers. And this is a bit of a tough position because you really are going to be looking at offensive tackle to help, replace Trent Williams at some point. And you could go with the Kingsley Suamatea, although I don't know if he's first round material. Or you could go with cornerback and get a guy like TJ Tampa. Mike Sanders still is really good, but he's more of a slot guy, and slot guys usually don't go round 1. Could go with an Ennis Rakestraw, though I think he's, kind of fallen out of the first round for a lot of teams, including, myself. So I think we're going to go with TJ Tampa here. He fits what the 49ers are looking for, and with no solid option at tackle, I think that they're going to have to go with cornerback there. And then rounding off the first round, we got the Kansas City Chiefs, and I know everyone and their mom goes wide receiver for them, no matter how many go in the first round. I think everyone mocks them to go with a receiver. And with Troy Franklin and Ladd McConkey still on the board, I think that they definitely would go with one of these two players. Ladd McConkey's more of that slot option who's, going to separate with absolute ease at the next level. He's going to be one of the best route runners in the league as soon as he gets drafted. Or you could go with a Troy Franklin, who's also a smooth route runner, but he's more of that deep threat. A lot of people have questions about his size and his, play strength. And I kind of do, but I think he's being a bit underrated for a lot of people. And I think that Troy Franklin fits what the Chiefs are looking for, that deep threat, just a better MVS. Troy Franklin had his drop issues last season, but if you look at the season before, he was a very good, contested catch player. He was solid. I think he's gonna improve on his hands once he gets to the next level, and I think he's just gonna be a better MVS for the Chiefs. So yeah, that's gonna do it. Let me know what you guys think of this mock draft down in the comments, and if you liked the video, consider subscribing. And as always, this is the Draft Nerd, and thanks for watching.